هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسعا وهي حسير ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير وكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم وسحقا لأصحاب السعير إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نذير ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي رحمنا ومن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتكم بماء معين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات الله.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المبارك الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. So the subject that I chose to discuss was a commentary of Dua-e-Kumail. And the reason I chose this, but before I get to that, I want to mention a few things before that. This has been a subject of interest of mine for over 10 years. Also the subject of my doctoral dissertation, my forthcoming book on the subject. But the reason I really love this subject so much is because I truly believe that there's a connection between our identity as Shias and Muslims and the dua and ziyarat literature that the Imams have taught us. So it's like, if you look at almost every occasion we have, 15th Sha'aban, 23rd of Ramadan, 21st, 19th, Thursday night, Rajab, Sha'aban, Muharram, Safar, there is some prayer to be recited. It's either a dua or it's a ziyarah, right? Taught to us by the Imams. And the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam have given us these supplications and prayers by which we can organize our spiritual calendar and by which we can draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by having a specific spiritual program throughout the year. And this is something that I find is very unique to Shia Islam. It's not that Sunni Islam does not have dua or supplication. They do, but not in the way that Shia do. Not in the structured way that the Shia have. And this is something very profoundly unique, and it's something that I think has become the kind of weaving thread of Shia spirituality and religious life from the time of the Imams, I argue, all the way until Abbas al-Qummi, the writer of Mafatih, or the compiler rather of Mafatih al-Jinan. So a question that immediately comes up about some of the more famous supplications like Dua-e-Kumail, Dua bi Hamza Thamali, Dua Maqaram al-Akhlaq, or the supplications in Sahifa Sajjadiyya, Ziyarat Ashura, Warith, so on and so forth, is how do we know that they're from the Imams to begin with? Salamullahi alayhim, right? This is a question that people ask, right? I mean, where did these things come from? Right? Where did they come from? Did someone just write them? I mean, how do we know that they're from the Imams, right? I mean, is there any evidence to tell us, or to indicators to tell us that it comes from the Imams themselves? Because if it comes from the Imams, then obviously it is then not only a prayer, but it's a lesson in belief. It's a lesson in piety. It's a lesson that teaches us how to live our life, right? And this is I think an important question, and this is something that I examine in great detail in a book that it's finished, alhamdulillah. After so many years, the book is finished, where I examine in the first 100 to 120 pages of this book, which is, I describe it as an arc of history of 1400 years, right? Where at different times and different places, the Shia of Ahlul Bayt always had some kind of devotion or prayer, depending on their situation, depending on the time, depending on the place, by which they can turn to Allah and by which they can express their love to the Ahlul Bayt. So it's two sides of the same coin. Do you see what I mean? On one hand, you have dua, which is the supplication to Allah. We're asking Allah for something, right? We're turning to Allah, describing His attributes and having that connection to Him. But the other side of that coin is our connection to the Ma'sumin. And we see that this is so remarkably and intelligently crafted from the time of the Imams. I would say at least from the time of the fifth Imam, Salamullahi alayhi, onwards, right? Where the religious occasions are now put together with a combination of dua and ziyarah. So for example, on Laylatul Qadr, we have these supplications, right? We have the amal of the Quran. We'll talk about that in a bit. We have all of these things that we recite. But what do we end Laylatul Qadr with? Or what is one of the most important parts of the amal of Laylatul Qadr? Who can tell me? Other than the amal of the Quran. What do we recite? Joshin Kabir is there, but that's not even as linked to Laylatul Qadr. Yeah. Yeah. There's something else that we do. That's not dua. No. Ziyarat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Why is it so important? What does the ziyarat of Imam Hussain have to do with Laylatul Qadr? What does the ziyarat of Imam Hussain have to do with 15th Sha'ban? What does the ziyarat of Imam Hussain have to do with other days of the year? Of Eid? Why? Because the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam have taught us that we cannot, that it's a way of reminding us that our door and our connection to Allah is through the Ahlul Bayt. And in every occasion we must, of those greatest of occasions, whether it be 15th Sha'ban or the Layali al-Qadr, we have to remember the shahadat of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Every occasion. And the question that then came up when I began this research in 2012, and now I teach a course on it at the University of Toronto. I teach a whole course on this. I'm so glad that the Senate agreed for me. The Senate of the university agreed for me to teach. I taught a graduate seminar on this year at U of T, which is what was I saying? Yes, which is that the question that always came up in my mind is this, Mu'mineen. This idea of doing ziyarat of Imam Hussain, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Salamullahi alayhi, on Laylatul Qadr, or on Eid, or on these other, or 15th Sha'ban, so on and so forth, on these other occasions, right? Is this something that was cultural, that was developed over centuries, that the Shias kind of said, oh yeah, you know what, ziyarat is important, let's do this. Or you know what, amal of the Quran is important, let's do this, right? Or is this something that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt constructed for us to do? This is an important question to ask. Now I'll ask you, why does it matter? It matters why? Because if we go with option one, where it's a kind of amalgamation of things, then people could say, okay, it's a cultural development, it evolved over time, and things were added and things were removed, and it's kind of like optional. It's not like, it's good to do, it's beautiful, but it's not sacred. It's not holy, it's not sacred, right? So for example, Sufra of Imam Jafar, that's not sacred, right? I mean, these are cultural things, right? People put kheer and all those things. This is nothing in the generations of the, it's not something that's the Ahlul Bayt have told us to do. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Seeking blessings and inviting people and da'wat and all that, it's good. But it's not a sunnah. Can we claim it's a sunnah? When we say something is a sunnah, that means that there's reward in it, and that means that when you don't do it, you're missing out on something, right? And this is a very fundamental question that I asked myself many years ago, and I set out to answer that question. And alhamdulillah, even Ayatollah Sistani, Hafidhullah, was of great help to me many years ago in help me think through how I can approach the answers to some of these questions. Hafidhullah, may Allah grant him a long life and protect him. When I met him in 2012 to discuss this subject, we spoke for almost half an hour about this subject with Samata Sayyid al-Marja al-Ala. And you know, and he turned to me and he said he really loved the subject. This is a very interesting subject, he said, because we don't really think of it that way very often. And the conclusion that I came to, I'm going to kind of take you through that right now, is that in fact the famous amals that we do, like Laylatul Qadr, like 15th Sha'ban, like Amal of Ashura, these we can almost take to the bank are from the Imams. They are really ancient. They are really ingrained in the very, very early consciousness of Shia spirituality. So what you are practicing today, I would say at least 75% or 80%, we can say with reasonable historical reliability, has come from the Ahlul Bayt. And that's very significant. Because often we said, oh, this is cultural, Shias do this, Shias do that. No. And this becomes important because if we can reasonably believe that what we are doing Ahlul Bayt did or taught us to do, whether it be Imam Bakr, Imam Sadiq, Imam Qadhi, Imam Rida, Imam Jawad, or whichever of the Aimma alayhim as-salam, or Nabi al-Akram, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, if any of them have taught it to us, then what happens to this amal that we're going to do in the month of Ramadan? Or reciting of Dua-e-Kumail, for example, on the 15th of Sha'ban or Thursday night. What happens? That act becomes a sacred act. That act becomes, it has an exponential effect on our soul, because we're performing a sunnah now. We're not just doing a cultural, we're performing a sunnah. So it doesn't matter. This is a sunnah that transcends culture. It transcends time. It transcends space. It transcends language. It transcends geography. Because it's a sunnah. And Shias are united by what thing? By our language? No, it doesn't unite us. Our culture doesn't unite us. Afghans eat different food from Lebanese. What unites us? Pardon me? Love for Ahlul Bayt. And our love for the Ahlul Bayt is linked through their supplication and ziyarat. It is the dua and ziyarat of the Imams which give us an opportunity to manifest and articulate that love that we have for the A'immah. And that is what has, one of the reasons, and I argue in my book, and that this is one of the reasons for the very survival of Tashayyu. Throughout every age. Look now, the Shias are being bombed to smithereens. The whole world is turning against them. Where have mu'mineen gathered now? Imam Rida? They are now gathering, so many of them. We saw the pictures in Mashhad of our brothers and sisters gathering at Imam Rida alayhi salam, because it's that love of the Ahlul Bayt, right? And these supplications or ad'iyah and ziyarat or afkar are like, they teach us how to love Allah and how to connect with the Ahlul Bayt. And that's why dua and ziyarat are two sides of the same coin, my dear brothers and sisters. You can't have one without the other. You know, I remember I was sitting with one of the shuyukh in Iran. This is where I disagreed with him on this issue. And he said, no, wait. You're writing on dua and ziyarat. These are two different subjects, he says. Do you dua, do ziyarat, choose two different. I said, no. I disagree with you, politely, because for two reasons I disagree. They're not two separate things. Why? Number one, our religious occasions have both. And we've already proven that. Most of our most important religious occasions, of most spiritual occasions, most important nights of the year, our holy nights, our high holidays, our high nights, have dua and ziyarah. Number one. Number two, half of the ziyarah is dua. Who's read ziyarat aminullah? Isn't half of it dua? The whole thing is Allah. You're beginning with dua, asking Allah, oh Allah, you guided me. Oh Allah, forgive me, this and that. So dua is a part of ziyarah. And then you transition to saying, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, Assalamu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'minin, so on and so forth. It's not one or the other. The Imams of Ahlul Bayt, if we believe that they have composed these things, and if we can prove that they have, with some reasonable metric, that they have composed this, then they have blended together in the most holistic and beautiful way an understanding of both Tawheed and Imamat in one. And it's Tawheed and Imamat in the form of devotional, in the form of prayer, in the form of some kind of spiritual act. And let me again tell you why dua, if a dua is from the Imam, why is it important? I'll give you an example here. Abu Hamza Thamali, who's ever heard of the dua Abu Hamza Thamali? You've heard of it, right? It's a companion of the fourth Imam. So Abu Hamza Thamali's son broke his hand. It's a very famous narration, Sayyid Mutawis narrates. And they go to the doctor to get a bandage or to get some kind of cast for it. And when the doctor is going away, in those days, I get to get some kind of plaster. I don't know what kind of plaster they would use in those days, but they had something like what you were wearing, or maybe something harder than that, right? To help keep his arms straight. And then at that moment, Abu Hamza Thamali says that I remember the dua of my Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, who taught me a special dua. So he put his hand on his son's arm and he recited the dua. When the doctor came back, the doctor saw the arm is not broken anymore. And his first response was, you Shia are magicians. We always know it. And he says, it's not. He says, this was the supplication taught to me by Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. So if we believe a supplication is from the Imam, and we can somehow have a reasonable confidence that the Ma'asum has taught us this, then the implications and the effects are enormous in both dunya and akhirah. Incredible, right? So that's why this subject matters. And the earliest text we have, of course, of dua is from Sayf al-Sajadiyya, which is from Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. And just to give you an idea of how important this book is, we have 60,000 turuq for Sayf al-Sajadiyya. Turuq meaning like different ways, different narrations through ulama and others that end up at Imam Zayn al-Abidin. So we have 60,000 turuq and 100 chains of transmission. 100 isnads for Sayf al-Sajadiyya, for the du'as that we recite from the Sahifa. Now this is a debate between 46 du'as and 53 du'as and stuff. And the munajat at the end, that's okay, that's maybe we can say is not as strong as the rest of the text. But the first 50 to 53 is very important. And in fact, I will tell you one more thing, just so you know how important it is. The Sahifa Sajadiyya is not a Shia text only. In fact, the earliest manuscript that we have of the Sahifa is from 416 Hijra, that's a physical book, which is in the Mashhad of Imam Rida. And guess who was the owner of it? A Sunni madrasa. And it was a Sunni madrasa in Khorasan province that was reading from the Sahifa and teaching it to their students in their school somewhere around the year 400 of Hijra. So that's over 1,000 years ago. And this earliest text, and I have a copy, I can show you pictures of it later, not the physical copy, I have the images from Imam Rida's library, alayhi salam. And that very same book has been sitting in the library of the Haram of Imam Rida since that day, of Sayf al-Sajadiyya. So Sayf al-Sajadiyya is not a Shia text per se. It is a Muslim text. It is something that Muslims prayed from and believed in and used as a part of their spirituality, regardless of them being Shia or Sunni. Which again gives us a lot of confidence in this particular text, which is a Sahifa Sajadiyya. And the Sahifa really becomes, I think, in some way the gold standard for later, compilations of supplication And we don't have time to go into how it was compiled and all of that. That's not the point here. If you want, inshallah, once the book is published, if it's open access, you can read it, inshallah. But this is all very, 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 very important. So this is, for example, one of the earliest manuscripts there from Lucknow, from India, of the Sahifa Sajadiyya. Right? So that's from Lucknow, Maktabat from Mumtaz Ulama in India, in Lucknow. And anyways, I don't want to go through all the copies and stuff, all of that. But the point is that it is like very, very important. And then the other very important dua is Dua Joshan Saghir, which I suggest you all recite tonight because it's the dua for when under attack. And obviously the Shias are under attack right now. Dua Joshan Saghir, there's two. There's Joshan Saghir and Joshan Kabir. Joshan means the shield. So there's the dua of the big shield and the dua of the small shield. This one has been taught to us by Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. And it's very interesting as to how he taught the dua. And I highly suggest you all recite this dua tonight. It's very important when you're under attack, when you're under threat, to recite this supplication. Because the Imam recited this during the time of the Abbasid period when they were plotting to kill him. And his companions would hide tablets in their sleeves. And when they would go into the majlis of the Imam, they would write down, as he was reciting the dua, they would copy it, and then they would put it back into their sleeves. Right? And this is in very early narrations about how they would copy the du'as in secret. What does this tell us? It tells us, one, the Shias at that time, at the time of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, this most likely took place in Medina before he was put under house arrest, that the Shias have had very difficult times where they could see their Imam, but they couldn't copy what the Imam was saying, so they had to hide it, and so on and so forth. And number two, in these most important majalis with the Imams, the Imam would make sure to teach them something that would be of spiritual benefit to them. And the dua known as Dua Joshan Saghir is one of them. And this is one of the most beautiful supplications. It talks about the razor's edge of the enemy being pointed against my throat. And oh Allah, blunt that edge. Right? And the Imam goes on to describe in such detail how the Abbasids, or at that time it was the Abbasids, are plotting to kill him and the Shia. Right? And that's why it became known as Dua Joshan Saghir. The Imam didn't give the title to the dua though. So sometimes we don't know the title of it, but they give the title based on the content of the dua. Sometimes the title is given by the Imam, sometimes it's not given by the Imam. But the point is that Dua Joshan Saghir becomes very important. And then our greatest scholars from the early period began teaching this particular supplication to each other and transmitting it. So, yeah, and this is known as the dua with the golden sanad. Right, so it has been reported from Al-Kadhim alayhi salam that we have reported it via numerous channels reaching my grandfather. Abu Waddah Zayd initially said to my father Abu Abdullah bin Zayd, informed me that a group of exclusive disciples of Abil Hasan al-Kadhim from among his family and his Shia were present in his majlis. في مجلسه, in the majlis of Imam al-Kadhim, and they had soft black tablets in their sleeves and writing instruments, so that when Abu al-Hasan, Imam al-Kadhim, issued an edict, they could retain what they heard from him by writing it down. So they heard the following from him as he was uttering the dua, and they began writing it down. So this is important. So what you're practicing is something that the companions of the Imams were writing down. It's not here and there running around and, kind of making it up as one goes along, right? Now, coming to Dua-e-Kumail. Dua-e-Kumail is a very interesting supplication. As we know, it is narrated for the 15th of Sha'ban by Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So there's another riwayah that says to recite it every Thursday night, but the first riwayah, the earliest one in Sheikh Tusi's Misbah al-Mutahajjad, tells us that Dua-e-Kumail is maqsoos for the 15th of Sha'ban, right? Which is known as Laylatul Qadr, the mini Laylatul Qadr. To prepare for the Layali Qadr, which are coming now, 15th Sha'ban is the night to prepare for that, basically. And this was the night in which Amir al-Mu'mineen taught Kumail ibn Ziyad Dua-e-Kumail. Now the question is, are we left with no resources to understand its origins? No, I don't think that's the case. In fact, again, the Dua-e-Kumail, the first portion of it that you can see up there, is actually found with a complete sanad in a very early Sunni source, Ibn Abi Shayba's Kitab al-Musannaf, or the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba, who died in 245. Again, a non-Shia source. So this idea that Shias make things up as they go along, this is complete nonsense. It's just people who are ignorant and don't know history, they don't know hadith, they don't know ilm al-hadith properly, make comments about things that they don't understand, obviously. So this is actually the first part. Not the whole dua is not, but the first part is found in one of the earliest sources before Sahih Bukhari, with this completely different chain of transmission going back to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And some of the words are not the same, but it's pretty much the same wording. Like, what does it say there, right? وَبِسُلْطَانِكَ الَّذِي مَلَأَتْ بِهِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ وَبِقُوَّتِكَ الَّتِي لَا يَقُومُ لَهَا شَيْءٍ, right? So anyways, وَبِنُورِكَ الَّذِي أَضَاءَ لَهُ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ, right? So, by your light that fills everything. So, this is found in one of the earliest sources of Sunni hadith literature. It's very interesting. But I have something else to tell you. There is something that we have that's not found in their literature. And those are two types of supplications. One, those for the 12th Imam, like Iftitah, Nudba, so on and so forth, Ali Yasin. Sunnis don't have that. I wouldn't expect them to. And Ziyarat. They don't have Ziyarah. I can't find it. They don't have it. This is something I've been looking for 12 years for. They don't have it. They have ones that they write on their own. So they do Ziyarat of Imam Hussain, Ziyarat of Imam Sadiq, Ziyarat of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. They do. All Sunnis do. Only Wahhabis don't. This is a new issue. But Sunnis do ziyarah. They believe that they're awliya, that they're blessed by Allah, and they go and they seek shafa'at from them. But they don't have ziyarat like us. There's no Aminullah, Warith, Ashura, Arba'in, nothing. They don't have this. They don't have it. This is something only the Shia have. Through their chain, through their silsila or tradition going back to the A'immah of Ahlul Bayt, alayhim as-salam. So this is interesting. Why Shias only have ziyarat. Sunnis do ziyarah, but they don't have these heavy-duty ziyarats like we have. Ashura and Arba'in and Warith and Aminullah and Jamia al-Kabira and Ali Yasin and all of these things. They don't have these texts. Why? I frankly think because those texts are not neutral. They're really hardcore Shia texts. I mean, there's bara in there. I think it's in the ziyarah text that we start seeing Shi'i theology really come front and center. It's very clear as to what you're dealing with there, and the implications of this is Allahumma la'an ummatan qatalatkum. Okay, well, who's the ummah that killed you? Right, and then if they're going to start reading that, they got to start asking themselves, well, who contributed to Yazid being in power? Well, then you got to go to Muawiyah. Then from Muawiyah you have to go to Uthman. From Uthman you have to go to Abu Bakr. So it's going to be a problem, right? These texts are problematic for non-Shias to read. As much as they say they love Ahlul Bayt and this and that, they're not going to read those texts because if they understand what they're reading, they're going to be like, or for example, lu'inat ummatan dhahrat alaykum. Right? May Allah remove His mercy from the community that pretended to support you when we're addressing Imam Hussain or we're addressing Amir al-Mu'mineen. Or may Allah remove His mercy from the community, from the ummah that said that they would support you or pledged wilayah and then turned back against that wilayah. So these texts, this form of ziyarah, Sunnis are not going to have. And there is not going to be unity, mu'minin, on this. So please don't ask for unity on this. There ain't no unity on this. We're Shias because this is what the A'immah have taught us, right? And we have very early texts and early books and so many texts from the time of the Imams with the ziyarat in them. I don't have time to go into all of that, obviously. I've done extensive research on this and as I said, I teach a course on this at the University of Toronto in the graduate school. But Sunnis obviously are not going to, and it's not no insulting if there's a Sunni brother here, nothing wrong with that. They're not going to practice that. It's not about being disrespectful to anyone. It's just that's not their jazz. That's not their mashrab. They're not going to. They're going to do their wilayat and love and qasida and all of that. That's fine, mankabat. But this goes beyond mankabat. This is more than that because this is. It's making political, historical, social statements about the state of the ummah. They're very deep. The stuff that's in there is very deep. And it requires soul searching. It requires going back into your books. It requires asking yourself very difficult questions about, I think one of the brothers was mentioning about, all these wars going on, but nobody asks how we got there, right? Did the war begin on October 7th? No, it didn't. But Ziyarat Ashura tells us it goes back to the beginning. May Allah remove His mercy from those who began. Al-Mumahidin tamkini min qitalikum. Those who paved the way for your killing. So, my point is that dua literature, good. I mean, not good in the sense it's good or bad, but in the sense that, yes, it can be found in Sunni texts. But do not expect the ziyarat literature to have similar cross-pollination as dua literature. That's just not going to happen. And if they are, I mean, I heard the Chistiya in India recite Ziyarat Ashura. So most likely some of these guys, honestly, I would say are crypto Shias anyways. Or they're living in Taqiyya or something, because I don't know how, even if you're a Sufi, Chistiya, the Chistis in I think they're in Delhi, right? If I'm correct, or right? There's a Sufi sect, the Chistiya, the Chistis in India, going back hundreds of years. I was told that the head of the Chistiya now in India recites Ziyarat Ashura in Muharram. So maybe they are crypto Shias anyways, to be honest. Maybe they are Shia, really. I mean, if you think about what you're reciting, I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's like, it's so. Anyways, but yeah, we're not gonna get much love from other people about that. This is a 1,000-year-old manuscript from the year 502 AH Hijrah in the library of Imam Rida. Again, the library of Imam Rida is so great. May Allah protect it, and the Haram right now, as you know, they are under attack. But this is the oldest book of dua that we have, physical book, that is still in existence from the year 502 AH. And there's something very interesting about this book. So in this book, it's called Misbah al-Mutahajjid by Sheikh Tusi. We have Ziyarat Ashura, Arba'in, Dua-e-Kumail, and Dua-al-Iftitah. The big ones are there. This is one of the earliest copies we have, the physical copy, and then there's also the earliest copy of Ziyarat Jami al-Kabira as an appendix, or what they call as an addendum to the book, right? And what's very interesting about this manuscript here is that the maraja of that time, or the greatest scholars of that time. Now, normally you think, du'as, marjas, mujtahids, their responsibility is just to teach haram and halal and fiqh. But no, that's not the only case. In that time, in fact, they would take a whole book of dua and they would teach it to their students and then give their students the authorization to copy the book. This is quite amazing. So you can imagine the Ayatul Sistani of that time, going back in the year 400, 420 of Hijrah, just into the early part of Ghaibat al-Kubra, is sitting in Najaf al-Ashraf at the Dari of Amir al-Mu'mineen, which is what we're told there in the text, right? That took place there. And he recites the whole book. It's like 400 pages. In there is Ziyarat Arba'in. In there is Ziyarat Warif. In there is Ziyarat Ashura. In there is Dua al-Iftitah. In there is Dua-e-Kumail. In there are the prayer for the hours. In there are many of the ta'qibat of namaz. In there are many things from the A'immah, salamullahi alayhim, preserved until that time in the old libraries of Baghdad. And then they taught it to one another. And that's how it survived today. So if we didn't have them, there would be no Shia spirituality that we understand today. So when I say we pray for our maraja, it's because they are the wajh of the madhab. They are the face of tashayyu. That is their sacrifices that have allowed me and you
to recite Dua-e-Kumail, to recite Ziyarat Warith, to recite Dua al-Iftitah. All of these things, where have they come? Who preserved them from the Imams? That when these books and these notebooks were left over from the companions of the Imams, who collated them? Who compiled them? Who taught them? Who ensured that they would spread from Najaf to Ray, to Tehran, from Tehran to Mashhad, to Yemen, to Medina? Where? How? How did these proliferate through the Muslim world to become synonymous with Shia identity? Would you not say it is synonymous with Shia identity? Yes or no? Or am I barking up the wrong tree here? Yeah, I think it is, aren't these? When I say these names to you, you know them. But I ask you, who's responsible for it? Have we given credit? Do we appreciate? How does this book survive 1,000 years in the library of Mashhad, where it was copied? And guess who copied it? You want to know something really interesting? The guy who copied this? He's from a place, it's on the last page. I don't have the last page here. Do I have the last page? Yes, I do have the last page, actually. Yeah. So this is the final page of the manuscript, right? Where he says, the year, I copied this in the year, 500 with name. في سنة 52 So I copied 102 AH, and then he gives his name, and he says النقاش الرازي ما وراء النهر. So he says that, no, his name is Naqash al-Razi, and he says that I got it from my teacher who was from Ma wara an-Nahar. Ma wara an-Nahar means that which is beyond the river. It's from the border of China. Ma wara an-Nahar, Transaxonia, it's a part like where Afghanistan, like basically as far east as the Middle East can go towards China. Transaxonia, towards the Oxus River. Ma wara an-Nahar. So this scholar from Ma wara an-Nahar traveled to Khorasan and taught this book of dua to his student, where it was copied. No, this was not necessarily copied in Khorasan, but it ended up in the library in Khorasan. But the person who copied it from the students of Sheikh Tusi was the founder of the House of Najaf al-Ashraf in the year 410 Hijrah. He came from east of Afghanistan to Iraq, which means these ziyarats and du'as and supplications and taqibat of salah that we recite, like the famous ones, I'm giving you the fame, not all of them, the big ones that we're doing, they're really important, and they spread all the way from, or they were copied by people all the way from towards the Chinese border area, farthest eastern point of the Muslim world, to Baghdad, to Najaf, to Tehran, which is Ray, to Mashhad, to Medina, to Mecca, to Yemen. These are all the cities that are marked. And how do we know this? Is it because I'm coming and saying, oh, would be nice to say? No, because we see notes in the margins of these texts. These are called marginalia. And in the margins, throughout history of the 1,000 years, somebody had the text and then writes in here that I taught Ziyarat Ashura, Ziyarat Arba'in to my students, for example, in Ray, in this year. And then I passed it on to someone else. That's how we know. It's not because not because I want to wish it is. This is archaeological evidence. This is like hard facts, hard evidence that we have. And these books have been preserved by ulama, especially the library of Imam Rida alayhi salam, one of the greatest libraries in the world for ancient books. And these books are still sitting there in the Sardab, in the library of the Haram of Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam. So this is just a little bit for you to know where our tradition comes from, why this tradition is important, why these amal that we're doing in the month of Ramadan are important. They come from the imams and our great scholars and our maraja and our fuqaha have gone through so much efforts from the early days of Ghaibah of the Imam, and before, of course, to preserve these texts that they copied in the majalis of A'immat Tahirin. Salamullahi alayhim. And this, again, what I'm bringing here is not from here and there fancy, just to make people feel good. No, this is archaeological evidence. This is as I call the smoking gun. We have this. We know this. This is important because it gives us that sense of our identity has not come from nowhere. We can be confident about our beliefs and the beliefs that are found in these things about bara'ah, disassociating from the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. It's there. These things are all there, right? And the dua iftitah that we recite in the month of Ramadan, again, that is there as well, right? So, I mean, this is one of the very, very great ulama of our time. Actually, when did he? I think he died in like 1970 or something, in the 70s, right? Yeah. He was a teacher of Ayatollah Sistani. His name was Agha Buzurg Tehrani. He was one of the great scholars of Najaf al-Ashraf, although from Tehran. But, Najaf was obviously the intellectual capital at that time, through the 1950s and so on and so forth. And he's written a lot on this. So I don't claim that all the information I've learned on my own. I would definitely say the work of Agha Buzurg Tehrani has influenced me greatly. And my teacher, the late Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussain al-Hussaini al-Jalali, was the student of Agha Buzurg. So my teacher and Sayyid Sistani were in the same class with Agha Buzurg Tehrani. And I inherited whatever I know of this through Agha Buzurg, or through Sayyid Jalali, who got it from Agha Buzurg, right? Who was one of the great scholars of Najaf, who compiled a lot of these old books and so on and so forth. And he was a very, very, very great man, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. And yeah. So, what else do I want? Oh, yeah. Let me just end off with this. There was some guy, I don't want to dignify him by saying his name, who was saying, oh, this amal of the Quran that we do has no validity. Shias are putting Quran on their head, they don't know what they're doing, and so on and so forth. There's nothing like this from the Aimma, nothing that, no one has ever taught us. It's all cultural, there's no point, no. When you go to the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, we see that this act of using the Quran as tawassul is something very important. So for example, we read here for Sayyid ibn Tawuz, ذكرنا بإسناده وحديثه في كتاب إغاثة الداعي ونذكرها هنا المراد منه هو عن مولانا الصادق. So he mentions with his chain of transmission going back to Imam Sadiq, وقال خذ المصحف فدعه على رأسك. Take the Quran, put it on your head and say, Allahumma bihaqqi hadha al-Quran wa bihaqqi man arsaltuhu bi. Right? And there was this person who was not an expert in dua. He's a speaker. He came to Toronto a few years ago and said, oh, the Shias are putting Qurans on their head. They don't know what they're doing, this and that. They're just following rituals like senseless people. Senseless people that don't know anything what they're doing. They come and line up in their masjids and will say niyaz and do all of this. No. We have teachings from the Imams to take the Musaf and put it on your head. This is not something that we're making up. This is not something that Ayatollah Sistani is making up or some other Ayatollah or Mujtahid or something. No, there are narrations going back to the Ahlul Bayt in early texts that teach us this, right? ثم تقول بمحمد 10 مرات بعلي 10 مرات بفاطمة 10 مرات. And there's another version of this from Imam al-Kadhim, narrated from Ali bin Yaqtin on Laylatul Qadr. Ali bin Yaqtin, of course, was the famous companion of the Imam who was working for the Abbasid government in secret. He was then martyred. Right? I don't know if you've heard the story of Ali bin Yaqtin. He was a famous companion of the 7th Imam that worked for the Abbasid government, and the Imam gave him special permission. Because in those days, the Abbasid government was equivalent of, the unjust rulers of our day, right? But the Imam gave him special permission and he rose up very high in the Abbasid government at that time. And Ali bin Yaqtin narrates, وَذَكَرْنَا بِإِسْنَادِهِ إِلَيْهِ فِي كِتَابِ إِغَاثَةُ الدَّاعِي. Again, in this very early book called إِغَاثَةُ الدَّاعِي, which is one of the book of du'as, from Ali ibn Yaqtin rahimahullah and Maulana Musa ibn Ja'far alayhi salam, يقول خُذْ الْمُصْحَفْ في يدك. Take the Quran in your hand and lift it up over your head and say, Allahumma bihaqqi hadal Quran. This is from Ali bin Yaqtin, from the 7th Imam, in the book Kitab Ighathatul Da'i, which is a reliable early text of dua, with a sanad going back. So, and then the Imam says here, Salamullahi alayh, فَإِنَّكَ لَا تَقُومُ مِنْ مَوْضِعِكَ حَتَّى يَقْضِي لَكَ حَاجَتِكَ, that you will not get up from your seat until your hajat is complete on that day. وَتَيَسِّرْ لَكَ أَمْرَكَ, and your affair will be made easy for you. And then we have another narration here from Imam Bakr and Imam Sadiq, أن تنشروا المصحف بعد ذلك على رأسك وتقول اللهم بحق هذا القرآن. And then we have another narration here. So we have narrations from Imam Bakr, Imam Sadiq, and Imam Kadhim with different chains of transmission, all of them telling us to hold the Quran and put it on our head. I hope that's enough to believe in it. So we're not taking things from here and there. This is not culture. This is not something, certain Shias, Pakistani Shias do it this way and Lebanese Shias do it. No, there's nothing to do with any. There's nothing to do with that. This is Shiasm. Ahlul Bayt Shiasm. Regardless of culture, regardless of language, regardless of geography or ethnicity, right? And then it says here 10 times, 10 times. And the interesting thing is at the time of Imam al-Kadhim, they would end at Imam al-Kadhim 10 times. And that's one of the ways it tells us that, that was from the time of the 7th Imam. Because we wouldn't say, Wabbi Ali ibn Musa Rida. It was up to Imam Kadhim. They said it 10 times. Bi Musa ibn Ja'far. That's one of the ways that we know, interesting. Right? And then... Oh yeah, and then there's another example here where someone came to the 6th Imam and was in a very difficult situation. Ashku ilayka daynan, he had a loan to pay. This is another narration in the Amali of Sheikh Tusi, very early source, Amali of Sheikh Tusi. That someone had a loan to pay, they were in a very difficult life situation and he needed a very special dua from the Imam. So what did the Imam say? إذا جنك الليل فصلي ركعتين. When it comes to nighttime, recite 2 rakat namaz, and then recite Ayatul Kursi, and then in the 2nd rak'ah recite Surah Al-Hamd and then Surah Al-Hashr, and then he says, take the Quran, the Mus'haf, and put it on your head. And then he gave the amal. Again, these are multiple narrations in different texts. I'm not bringing you from one text. There are multiple chains, multiple narrations. And there it is on the screen. This is for the person who has a loan. It's going through a very difficult time in life. And the Imam said, when the night reaches, perform your prayers at night, recite Ayatul Kursi, and then when you finish, recite this dua at night. This is to be done at night. This is not even the Laylatul Qadr. So I hope I was able to shed some light on this. I know I've gone over time. But inshallah, I hope this was beneficial for you all to understand. And tomorrow night we'll go into Dua-e-Kumail more. But I wanted to kind of introduce why our Shia supplications, why our practices are strong and important to perform. وآخر دعوانا والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله طيبين طاهرين.